Chapter 14. Death and Destruction Second Semester. Back to fucking 7th grade. You could go down in the basement to smoke and talk to your teachers, but it was one scary place. You had to sneak past big boilers and heating ducts and creepy cement passages. It was like going down into the catacombs. Dead eyes, dust, and smells dominated the area. But once you got there, you were a big shot. Not all students were so brave, so it was rewarding. But remember, once you got down there, the cigarette was still more important than you. We had a secretary who was a dingbat at best, but she loved her role. She once sent me for a cup of coffee and requested 9 cubes of sugar. I asked her to repeat that, and she did. I headed off to the cafeteria and told Leona what Anne, the secretary, wanted. Leona said that was her usual order. I said 9 cubes won't even dissolve into 1 cup of coffee. She said she knew that, but Anne wanted 9 cubes and would figure out if I cheated her. She said to just do it and hurry up because she didn't want to deal with her again today. Oh, the years of death and destruction. Maybe it was 7th grade or maybe it was 8th for that matter. It all blends in together as one big funeral. My grandfather died, which had little or no effect on me. I was not close to him. His wife Anne moved in for a while but drove my father nuts. She was too weak to walk across the room when my parents were home, but during the day she would vacuum and clean. This drove my dad wild. Eventually, she was put into a rest home over to Mayville. It was a typical nursing home with 2 beds in every room and a few lockers. Grandmother Ann decided someone was stealing her shoes and made a big fuss about it every time we visited. Mother couldn't figure it out, or maybe she didn't care. Once we actually looked around, but the rest of the time she was painfully ignored. I think what she lost was her ability to walk away from the situation at hand, not necessarily the shoes themselves. I would get so bored visiting her that I would start to wander around the hallway and snoop into other people's rooms, spying whatever I could. One Sunday I had done this, and an old man in a wheelchair sat at the end of the hallway diddling with something. I had my back up against the wall, so I slowly crept down the hallway to see what he was up to. Slowly, the largest penis I had ever seen came into view. Now, I had seen a baby penis and my father's when I was young, but this was like a stud horse. His penis was huge, and he played away, smiling and humming. An attendant came out of a room and saw what was happening, and just as politely as possible slid the man's penis back into his pants, gave me a sly look, and walked away. No more had she walked away that he dug that penis back out and started diddling it again. You never know what you're going to see, so keep your eyes and ears open. Anne did not live long, and we buried her in the spring. I didn't know where to put this little story, but it seems right. My mother and her girlfriends were excellent knitters. I walked into Elner's to a knitting bee, and they were all knitting penis warmers, freehand style. The men complained that once they got older, their penises were always cold. So the women set up a knitting bee to help out the old men. One woman would knit a while and say, "Do you think John is this long?" And all the women would pick out one woman and look at her. At that point, they would all start to laugh. Then another woman would hold up her penis warmer and say, "Big enough for Steve?" And they would all again pick out one woman and stare at her. The women would laugh and laugh and laugh. It's probably why all these women lived well into their 90s. You shouldn't ever try to beat the train. I was only a young girl, but I knew of 2 people killed by a train. One happened during lunch when we were all downtown. The woman was killed as well as her unborn child. She had 2 children with her, but what happened to them I never knew. We headed back to school with heavy hearts. We all knew 3 of her daughters, and they were all up at the school waiting for the afternoon classes to start. We were required to wait in the old gym until start time, and I remember they stood down by the basketball hoops. They knew something was amiss as we all sat in the bleachers staring at them. To make matters worse, the teachers were out in the hallway arguing about who was going to tell them the horrible news. My mother said it was none of my business and I should just go back to working. Work will set you free of the worry. Then my neighbor was buried under dirt while connecting the city water lines. As the men tried to dig him out, the owner of the house had a heart attack. Keep in mind, an ambulance was an hour away. They had just created a golden hour notice, which suggested you had 1 hour after an accident to get to the hospital and get treatment. We were told in no uncertain terms, by Mother of course, that we had no golden hour. The main problem was the ambulance was an hour away. The owner of the home lived that day, but my neighbor died. Soon after, the McLaughlin boys got into a car accident with a pregnant mother at the top of the hill by the garbage dump. She died and they lost all her teeth. Then Shirley, a classmate, was killed when she was bounced out of the back of a pickup truck. Then at Thanksgiving, a new teacher we had was murdered in a hotel in Kentucky. Then to top that off, the librarian died of cancer. It was quite a year. It was quite a year for all of us. When I was older, and these large-scale shootings started, the schools would provide extra trauma counseling. I thought, what the heck? We were traumatized and told to go back to work. I wonder how counseling would have helped us. But there was no money for such trivial things. The first time I heard that city kids got carpeting, it felt like food was taken straight off our plates. Counseling seemed off the charts. After that, my friend's parents were killed on M46 in a 2-car accident. There were many stories of fighting about who was to use the only ambulance. Medics wanted to take my friend's parents because they could see they had a fighting chance. My friend's parents insisted on the medics taking the other couple. They all died. They had no golden hour to be saved. They all showed up in the funeral home. 2 victims, then 3. Then the 4th victim arrived, barely giving the town time to breathe. They had my friend upstairs and wouldn't let me see him, and I regret not fighting them to this day. Again, my mother said not to get involved in other people's lives. I felt like they were slowly burying me.